This is the Profit Tool Belt podcast. I'm Dominic Rubino. And if you're a subcontractor, this is the episode you've been craving and you didn't even know you needed it. I'm going to be talking to Steve Hearon. Now, he's from Brandpoint Services. Who are they? Well, they're a company that grew up from a very, very small company into a massive, I think, $100 million company. And we're going to be talking about the leadership playbook and the biggest mistake subcontractors make. Might get the numbers wrong, but Steve is responsible for hiring about 500 subcontractors all across the United States every single year. And if you're a subcontractor who wants to know how to get those bigger commercial contracts and deliver them properly and get called back on the next one, you're going to want to hear what Steve has to say. I'm very excited to have him here. He and I share the same background in student painting, believe it or not, way back in the humble days when we were young guys. So looking forward to hearing what Steve has to say. And I'm really looking forward to you learning a little bit from him on how he sees the world now when he hires subcontractors all over the place. Let's get to it. Mr. Steve Hearon, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. How are you today?
I'm good. Good to see you. You got your Brandpoint colors all color coordinated.
I do, and I would be remiss if I didn't note that my
Represent.
Philadelphia Eagles are going to be playing in a very big football game this weekend,
Yep.
and very proud of that. It's our second football Super Bowl appearance in the last 3 years, our third in the last 7 years. It's been a heck of a run. I try to explain to my two daughters how lucky they are that their dad in his first 45 years of being an Eagles fan saw two Super Bowls,
Right.
lost them both, and now they in the last 8 years 3 Super Bowls, 7 years 3 Super Bowls, and won one and hopefully taking care of business this weekend. So
it's a big deal.
but I know we didn't come here today to talk.
Oh, there you go. You got the Brandpoint Services logo going. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Thanks for indulging me.
Yeah, of course. That's nice looking. But you and I found out something cool in the world of, because you and I are going to talk about leadership and subcontractors at business and how subcontractors can grow, which you're an expert in. But then you and I found this little side thing that Stephen Covey, who's a leadership expert,
I pride myself in knowing the Eagles roster up and down and left and right, down to the practice squad, down to
wow. Okay.
injured reserve. I'm a bit of a nerd that way. And so I've been aware of Covey for a couple of years now. He's been returning punts and kicks for the Eagles on and off up until recently. And why he's notable is that he's probably one of the few NFL players that are on the field that are smaller than me in stature. He's quite normal guy. He's probably 5'9", 165 pounds, soaking wet, but he runs a 4.3 40, and he's been a decent part of the team the past couple of years up until very recently. And I had no idea he was related to Stephen Covey, and I'm a huge fan of Stephen Covey.
And as am I. So that's a pretty cool little, what do you call it? Triangulation that we had here today.
Yeah. Really neat. I can't wait to tell everyone I know.
Oh, at the party. Yeah. And we fact checked this on the internet. So let's put that little 10%, that little 10% there that it's not Wikipedia. We found it on Google, but there you go. Britton Covey related to Stephen Covey. Yeah. I love that. He's the grandson of author Stephen Covey.
That makes more sense. When we were looking this up together and it said that Stephen Covey passed away in 2012.
Yeah.
It started making me think maybe that's not his son. It could be his grandson.
Yeah. Interesting. Did you know that Covey earned the Eagle Scout rank in 2015? It's a big deal to be an Eagle Scout.
Yeah.
Big deal. Okay, listen, we're off topic already. So today you and I are going to talk about the biggest mistakes subcontractors make. But before we even get there, let me ask you this. Steve Hearon, who the heck are you? And how is it you come to be speaking to all these forward-facing contractors all over the world?
Well, it's I guess I could go all the way back to being a student at Bucknell University studying business, needing money, and looking for the most leverage I could get to make as much money as possible in as short a period as possible. I wasn't afraid to work, but I learned from when I was waiting tables, tending bar, and then eventually painting houses for one of my fraternity brothers, College Pro Painters, where you and I both know a lot of common folks. So I realized that by painting houses, I'm limited by how many hours of daylight if I'm
Right.
painting exteriors, and how many, how many times my one single arm can go like this.
Yeah.
But then when I became a crew lead and had people under me,
Mm.
and then eventually started my own painting business, I recognized that, well, I can only make my $10 an hour doing this 40 hours a week, and that's my limit, maybe some
Yeah.
overtime. But if I'm presiding over a large team and I'm making $5 for every hour he works and $5 for every hour she works and it just then came down to my bandwidth of how many people was I comfortable presiding over and still maintaining quality, and
Yeah.
having a scalable enterprise, and that changed my life. That
Yeah.
that absolutely
Just that
changed my
view.
life. Yeah, I'm grateful for College Pro for showing me that the business model of typical contractor, and from there we grew, and so I ended up foregoing a traditional job search and just grew my business after graduation. And then College Pro actually came to me and said, would you take a corporate job to go grow and move to different parts of the country and bring our concept to college students all over North America? So
Right.
for me, it was specifically Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and then eventually New York before I left College Pro. Left the business for a while, was in
Yeah.
automotive and franchising for a chunk of my career. And then in 2005, I rejoined the home improvement
The world.
industry or commercial contracting world and joined CertaPro Painters, and
Yeah.
was part of the team that took CertaPro from under 100 million, around 100 locations, to today that company's approaching $1 billion.
Crazy. And
And
CertaPro and College Pro there's a linkage, isn't there?
there is, the founders were the same,
Hmm.
and then they were both owned by uh, the franchise company, which then eventually became First Service, Canadian company, as you know, and traded on the Canadian exchange. And yes, lots of crossover from those companies. CertaPro became sort of the grown-up College Pro.
Yeah, that's right. It was when you're going to run it full time, not just during college.
Exactly.
I was I was one of the other brands. At the time I didn't know the difference. College Pro, I think, had yellow trucks. We had red trucks. That was our big
Yeah.
brand differentiation when you were a kid. By the way, a van that I painted by hand in the alley
That's great.
with a roller.
Well,
It looked
and
horrible.
it's one of the neat things about any of us that started businesses when we were very young like that. The war stories,
They're fun.
the gaining the experience of having to cover a payroll
Oh
that
my
I didn't
God,
have the
that one
client's check
alone.
deposited right on
Yeah.
Wednesday. By the time the bank closed, that payroll wouldn't cover it on Thursday, and my painters wouldn't get their checks Friday, and they'd all walk off the job
Yeah.
site.
And then not want to come back again on Monday because they don't know if, yeah. Oh my
Right.
gosh.
And the corralling of used equipment, and figuring out ways to obtain credit when you don't have credit, and you're 22 years old or 21 years
Yeah.
old or younger, and navigating somebody's $1 million home that they've trusted you to put ladders around and tarps and cover up the rose bushes and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And those experiences are what set the stage for, to this day, I speak some of the same language that I spoke back then when I'm talking in contracting terms, and the expectations that I set with my clients and my painters and whatever tradesmen, because now at Brand Point, it's not just painting.
Yeah.
Brand
Yeah.
Point,
What's the scope of Brand Point? Let's
so
land on
Brand
that.
Point started actually as a division of Certa Pro, in terms of the name
Oh,
Brand Point.
right.
Started as a division of CertaPro Painters, and then eventually got into other trades, and so spun off of CertaPro, and has
Mm,
since merged with another company, and then we've had acquisitions. So a lot has happened on our journey to 100 million from very, very humble beginnings. And as a result of looking to grow and service as many clients as possible on this national scale, or really international scale, as we service Canada as well,
mm,
we've gotten into painting, flooring, electrical, HVAC, plumbing. There really isn't much we wouldn't do for a client if we have an existing relationship. We try to keep
right.
it to like 8 or 9 core trades when we're engaging a client for the first time and making sure that
Yeah.
we're building the relationship on our strengths. But eventually we become a solution for a big national client that
The
doesn't.
opportunities come up and then you guys, assess as you go.
We saw problems.
I love it. We solve problems. You said that with such confidence. So, Stephen, if I understand you correctly, there's no limit to where your contracting business can go.
There,
Because if you look
your
back at the origin
imagination.
story, painting
Yeah,
houses, same as mine.
your imagination. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, people were just starting to talk about EV charging stations, right? I
Right.
mean, like
Yeah.
there's things that come up along the way. Nobody knew what cell phone towers were 40 years ago. I
Yeah.
mean, like these
Yeah.
kinds of things that require structures, require fixtures, require something. ATM machines is another good one, right? It was a big part
Oh,
of our
so
history
you guys are doing
because
ATM machines?
once an ATM machine became a thing,
Right.
well, somebody had to install millions of them all over the country. Who installs those? Contractors. and,
I only
and,
see the YouTube video of people uninstalling them, if you know what I mean.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a way to uninstall that's
It's
a little
not the
more
same.
acceptable than maybe some of the videos you've seen, but
Yeah.
that's another thing. Once you're in, a bank's a great example. Once you're in with a bank,
Mm.
you've seen how often banks merge, get acquired, rebrand. Once you're in and understand their brand, well, you're the first call they make then when they
Yeah.
say, hey, we just merged with XYZ Bank and now all the colors are changing from blue to red. Come on back. And then here we go. And
Change it
we
again. Yeah.
over and over and over and over again. So it's those long-term relationships that become really fruitful on the national stage.
Yeah. You reminded me just now of a party I went to for a client, and they're an HVAC contractor. And, they've got this big yard, like a works yard, but at the back, it's kind of a grassy field and they have picnics back there. And so we go back there and I'm helping them set up the barbecue. We go into this back shed and the shed is incredibly well made. It's very heavy. And so I'm there with the owner. I'm like, why is the door on this thing so heavy? He goes, it's a safe. We got it from a bank we did work at. And it was, they had uninstalled the entire safe because I guess they're compartmentalized panels. And then he just installed it in the backyard. It's his shed with an 800-pound door on it. I'm like, okay, it's a bit of overkill. Nobody's going to take your barbecue, buddy, but if you got to use it, you got to use
it. Yeah, as a contractor, when you're asked to demo, right, basically you're asked to go into a space and clear it out before you go in and start rebuilding it or refurbishing it. You'd be amazed at the kind of things that come out of the demo process.
Yeah.
A lot of
Well,
interesting
and there's a very different mindset with a corporation that's just like, get rid of that stuff. And you're like, well, that's still usable, or it's only 2 years old. And anyways, we're off on a tangent here, but
yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to really pick your brain on was the subcontractor world. The dream, when guys are sitting around having a coffee or a beer, they're like, well, how can I get bigger commercial contracts? They're like, what do we need to do to get to the next level? And I believe they need to change how they act in the market to get those bigger, more lucrative contracts, those more trustworthy contracts, those longer term contracts. And that's what I wanted to ask you about. How does a subcontractor get on the radar of a Brand Point Services or somebody like you guys?
That's, it's an interesting, thinking back to where I ever was in that, as I was getting underway to think of growth and how to become bigger and then even bigger. And we actually started as a subcontractor of a bigger GC than us. That seems to be the most natural evolution. Is you look at who you want to be and you partner with them and learn everything you can possibly learn about them until one of you outgrows the relationship. And then you hopefully in a friendly way, grow apart perhaps and become more peers than, that kind of big chair, little chair relationship. I've seen it under us. We have developed many subcontractors that started out doing 10, 20, 30, $50,000 of business for us and now do over $1 million a year in business for us. And as a result, it's given them the platform to reach out to other companies similar and grow and scale.
Right.
And I don't resent it at all. I'm very proud that there are contractors that I could introduce you to that have a Brand Point logo on the fire pit of their backyard of the home that they built with money that they were subcontracted from Brand Point because they wanted to grow their business. And it was just a matter of understanding that companies like mine exist and being willing to play a slightly different game. It's not the same as typical residential transactional work. It's different working on national clients
Yeah,
profile.
much. Well, and so what are the I want to ask what the expectations are, but let's look at it from a different viewpoint. What are the mistakes you see subcontractors making when they're on your list and they knock themselves off? What are they doing to make you go, "Oh, Jerry, you were
Yeah.
there."
Well, and to give you an idea, we have thousands of subcontractors that we work with,
Hmm.
but 80-20 rule absolutely applies. 20% of them are getting 80% of our value because they're the ones that recognized, oh, I can do the things that Brand Point wants me to do. And if I just do those things and
Mm-hmm.
deliver on my promises here with these other kind of things that Brand Point needs, which I can get into, if I just do that consistently every week, I'm going to get more from Brand Point without even asking. Brand Point's going to ask me, will you do more? Will you go to the next town over because the guy over there is letting me down? Will you go over to
Right.
this town because the situation is not working out for us? It starts with transparency.
Wow. Okay.
All right. So if you're a local subcontractor for us, you're representing us in that market to a client that most likely a Fortune 500 huge national company with thousands of locations.
Right.
So one mistake at one of those 1,000 locations could cost everybody the account. And now your mistake in Tuscaloosa has created a problem for somebody in Seattle because there's a ripple
It
effect
rolls
to
up the chain. Yeah.
it absolutely does. And so transparency is first and foremost. Your eyes and ears on the ground. You exist for us in this situation, so we don't have to. So it's, the reason you're a subcontractor is so that I don't have to hire somebody in Pittsburgh
I'm the local
and put
guy.
them on my payroll and have them do this work when a more efficient way to do that would be to find someone that's in Pittsburgh
Mm.
already doing this work, qualified to do the work, licensed to do the work, is the right person team for the work, and we can partner
Yeah.
and you represent me. And it just comes down to, all right, here are the things that you need to do. And it starts with transparency. It doesn't help anybody if you're hiding things from me.
Oh, I was going to say, what does transparency mean to you? Because it's a $3 word, but what does it mean to a guy right now listening who's like, I'm ready to take that next level? Okay, what does it mean to be transparent?
I feel like we grow up because again, I've been a contractor at the kind of entry point of this
Mm,
game. And we grow up feeling like we don't belong for whatever reason. We just grow up feeling like I don't belong to this club. I'm trying to get into this club. I want to get
mm,
into this club. And so I can't afford any blemish. So I'll massage the truth to make sure that there aren't any blemishes that appear to
ah,
be on me. And unfortunately, that people that are sitting in my chair and my teams know if you're
see
claiming to
through
be
it.
a perfect contractor, you're lying right off the top because there isn't one. Like none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
Mistakes happen. We will judge you on how you deal with the mistake. We're not going to judge you because you made one. We will make one. We're going to send you a work order that was wrong, or we're going to
Right.
send you to the wrong location. We make mistakes. Do we own it? Do we compensate you for the time that we cost you? Do we acknowledge that, you were wronged in some way and we want to make it right? Just a flip. If you made a mistake, just tell us how you're fixing it.
Yeah.
And let's get aligned on the plan so that we can communicate to our client, because where we lose all credibility is when the reports that we have to provide to our client say, oh, the contractor said they were there from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Our guy said he was there.
Right.
And then the client says, we don't have any record of that on our side. You're being lied to. Do you really know what your teams are doing? And then your
Yeah. It starts
credibility.
to open up a whole Pandora's box of trust. The trust is gone.
We've got to be able to align together on this side of the table and say, all right, client has a perception of
Mm,
us that we're trying to maintain at the highest level. A bump on the road was hit. We can't be trying to solve the problem in a silos and communicating, we got to get together, solve the problem, come up with the plan, and then in unison go back to the client and say, here are the steps we're
yeah.
going to take. We can't be afraid to own a mistake. We will earn respect that way. And I can't tell you how many times I've said it, but yet there's so many contractors that unfortunately struggle with telling you the truth when they make a mistake.
Yeah, that may come from a place of fear, and I've probably been that contractor myself, especially when I was much younger. But I what I've come to, my son asked me, he goes, "Dad, what's a business?" And I'm like, "Uh-oh, that's not supposed to be a hard question, right?
Right.
Like, how does it
It's a
live?"
good one
At
though.
the time, he was like 10 or 12, I don't know. And he just asked me, "Dad, what's a business?" And I'm like, and the first thing I could think of was a business exists to solve problems for other people. And
Yeah.
actually, I think in that moment of like absolutely freaking out that I didn't know the definition of a business, to tell to a kid, I was like, I
Yeah.
think that's it. I just exist to solve problems. Give me problems. We're going to deal with them. It's just another problem, but I'm a guy that fixes problems. And it sounds like that's
I,
what you're like. There's going to be problems on my side and problems on your side. You probably don't want to hear 6 of them that are the same again and again and again, but you
right.
probably
Well,
want to see that
and
I'm a fixer.
what my clients want to see is that I know enough about the game to prevent as many mistakes as possible. I can't
Mm-hmm.
prevent them all,
Mm-hmm.
but because of how long we've been doing this, I got a long list of things that when we do a postmortem on a project that didn't go well, and we say, what could we have done at that step to have prevented that from happening? Okay, noted, and then you start to see the common threads in your
Yeah.
projects that didn't go the way you wanted them to go. And you go, wow, in all 7 of the projects that we didn't hit our profitability mark or we didn't deliver what the client expected on all 7 of those, this thing didn't occur.
Right.
And so we need to put in our SOP this thing now.
Got to go fix
And
that.
that's going to now minimize the risk, at least at step 1, that we don't have a breakdown, right? And at each
Yeah.
phase, you're trying to be preventative in your planning as much as possible, even though you still can't plan for everything.
You can't. And when we talk about it here on the show, we talk about something called the end of job report. I think you called it a postmortem.
Yeah.
There's so much to be learned in that. And I remember being the guy that ignored them because I'd be like, oh, that job's done. There's nothing to be learned from a job that's done. I'm going to get the next job. And I would not go look at my old jobs. But that's where the juice is, because you start to
So
figure out things.
what I used to stand in front of groups of new business owners all the time when I was doing franchise development for CertaPro. So we would bring people in from corporate America who had lost their jobs but had a couple $100,000 in their 401k and didn't want to go back to work at perhaps my age now.
Yeah.
I'm in my north of
30s.
50 years. And so it's 49 again.
Yeah.
And so, you get to that point and you go, do I want to go back and have a
I don't want a
boss
boss.
now?
Yeah.
And I've worked at the same company for 20 years and I don't want to, okay, I'm going to buy a business. I should be able to do this now. And so I would have the chance to stand in front of people that had never owned a business, but felt like they were ready to, and we felt like they were ready to. And now the training begins. One of the things I learned from doing this year after year, I could give you a manual. Here's your manual.
Yeah.
And you could read all about everything that I've already learned in the manual to help you. And then I could give you a speech to help you. I could show you a video to help you. I could bring in other CertaPro franchise owners that have walked this far. I could do all these things to try to get you to not make certain mistakes. But the only thing that you'll actually remember is when you go out and make that mistake.
And you go make the mistake yourself. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And you get a burn and a scar.
Yeah.
Like, I burnt my arm on that stove. It scarred me. It took a month to heal. It traumatized my cat because I screamed and then the cat jumped. I will never leave that burner on that.
Yeah.
Those are the memories that shape you, that scar tissue that makes you the business person that you are. Sometimes you just have it. I can't tell you everything that you need to know. You're going to have to go out and experience some failure.
You're going to have to learn it. Yeah.
And that's probably another thing I wasn't even planning on talking about, but that risk tolerance when you're working on the national stage, if you want to get outside of your current comfort zone, because a lot of contractors figure out what they're really good at early on
Sure.
and say, I'm staying in this box. And I respect that. You're staying in that box, stay in that box and organically grow. And that's a great path. But if you're a little more aggressive and you're a little more ambitious and you want a little more rapid growth, you got to get out of the comfort box, take some risks. And that means you're going to fail sometimes. And so it's okay. You can pick yourself up from it, dust yourself off, and then ask, why did I fail? I thought I had a plan.
Yeah.
And then you can learn and you keep growing.
So one of the mistakes that contractors can make or subcontractors can make to fall out of your favor, to stop getting the phone call, is lack of transparency, and then just not dealing with mistakes as they come up. It's how they communicate. It sounds like communication is the key, like communicating
Communication, I would
properly
call
and
it
quickly.
also a lack of urgency, right? That if a mistake was made, the sooner you get it to me, the sooner some very experienced people can help you solve this problem. You're not alone. We're partnered on it.
Mm.
So we can help you from afar with experience in these situations, but you can't wait. You can't have the problem Monday and then let us know Friday. So it's that sense of urgency that, okay, there's something happening in the plan that's run amok. We got to
Mhm.
get back on track. Let's get you that information as quickly as possible.
You know,
Um,
these are just good business practices, aren't they? Though.
I can't. I've spent almost my entire career in contracting, but yeah, I would
I
say that if I'm on the customer side and I am having a problem with a car I purchased, and I've got the dealer, and the dealer keeps telling me bring it next month, bring it next month. That yeah, that would frustrate me, and that
that
they
would
would be
frustrate
better
you.
off just put me in a rental car, get me take the pressure off the situation so that they can then solve the problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's basic business practice.
You'd think it's basic business practices, but so many of us in the trades, we start in the trades. Maybe we break off from another contractor we worked at because we're doing side work, making huge money on the weekends, going, I think I should do this as a full-time job. Before you know it, you've got a crew. Then you're at $1 million. Then you're at $3 million. Then you're starting to work on bigger jobs, but you're still at heart, or I'm speaking about myself, at heart, I'm still a technician. I'm still the guy painting the house or fixing the deck or doing some drywall patching. I'm still that guy. I didn't necessarily go to business school. I most likely don't have my MBA, which, by the way, I'm fine with.
Yeah,
I don't need to be told how to do things. I'd rather go burn my arm and figure out how not to do it.
yeah.
But because a lot of us come through that background, we don't necessarily have that formal training in what it's like to run a and I don't want to be disrespectful to anybody because you do have a real business, regardless of the size, but you don't know how to run a real business.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah, and that's the other piece of this thing is if you want to play on the national scale, there are things involved in the deliverable
Mm,
that aren't involved in what you do locally. For example, if you want to get paid for your services, and you should, okay,
sure.
if you want to get paid, I don't care how beautiful the wall looks that you painted. If you haven't taken a before picture, an in progress picture, an after picture, if you haven't filled out the appropriate reports, and if you haven't then submitted all of this together in the
Mm,
exact way the client wants it, you will not get paid for that. And that overwhelms a lot of our craftsmen out there, our craftspeople out
right.
there
Because they say,
who,
look at the wall, it's done.
yeah, and pride themselves in beautifying spaces.
Mm,
They take very deep pride in that, but they don't realize it doesn't matter. You did it for free if you don't have the infrastructure in place to help you with all of the back end stuff.
How much
And
does that
so
rule set come from you guys, though? Or how much does that have to be? I have to know that internally before I start to apply for jobs with you.
we teach this all day long, right? We have a portal that you can engage with for us to try to make this as simple as possible. But well, one of the tricky things and where our value comes into play, because again, I only have self-performing teams in certain geographies for certain things.
Right.
And then of course I have self-performing supervisors all over, but the
Yeah.
majority of what we do is push through a subcontracting network. The value that we bring, besides just taking work from A and subcontracting it to B, is organizing all that stuff and making it really easy for the client
Mm,
to get that work done on the ground. But these clients have major restrictions, right? If you're working for XYZ massive company
yeah.
with thousands of locations and tens of thousands of employees, you're not bringing a ladder into their workspace without certain, not just any insurance, the
The
insurance
right.
that exactly matches what they want that insurance to,
Right.
right? And so you've got all these things that customer A in the healthcare space could be completely different than customer B in the retail space or customer C in the restaurant space. My experiences have been enabled us to have teams that are experts in all those spaces. And so now we can make it easy for you at the local level to access all that revenue that's taking place there that you have to kind of
Millions, like gajillions of revenue, right? Really
huge amounts.
Yeah.
But you'll never be able to access it unless you can plug into a platform like mine, because those big clients don't want to deal with tens of thousands of subcontractors. They want to deal with one. They want,
as one of my
source
coaches says, somebody wants one throat to choke.
I hate to use that.
Don't you hate to use that word? Don't you hate to use that? But you do need a single point of contact.
One hand to high five. They want one hand to high five.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. You keep talking about this list, and I feel like I'm not allowing you to develop that. What's this list that you've got that you've used that?
Well, table stakes are you have to be properly insured, and that's not just at a local level, right? That's insured to operate on a national level. So, you need to get the appropriate insurance, and we could, of course, when you reach out to us, if that day ever comes, we'll send you an insurance certificate with here's the mock-up of exactly what it needs to look like. Go to your insurance agent and or a broker and off you go. That's just a given. But then in terms of how to execute on the work, you've got to be able to be technologically savvy enough to communicate with us through your smart device, utilizing text, utilizing apps that we use to help you be able to go onto a job site, mark that you're there, have it geolocate you and validate that you're there. Right. Take your before pictures, it'll drop right in our app. Take your progress pictures, take your up. It's not rocket science, but it's a little different than just painting Mrs. Smith's, third bedroom. Yeah. And you're in and out of there and you collected a check, like this, that's just not how it works in our world. And one of the realities is also cash is an issue when you're trying to grow. And if you want to grow in this space, our customers don't pay cash, and often they don't pay by check, and they want terms. So if you can't afford to do a project that cost you a couple $1,000 and you got to pay that bill and not collect it on the other side for maybe 30, 45, 60 days, this is not the game for you.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to raise, because you have to be able to run the business on its own while you're taking on some of these projects, knowing that the cash flows, it's coming. Those, that large restaurant chain is a good credit risk. They're not going away. They have 1 million locations. They served 1 billion, last week, right? Yeah. But you have to know it's not hand to mouth. You can't be running a hand to mouth business to go and do work for them.
Yeah, you have to be willing to make these little investments. And where you'll appreciate it is, especially if you're in any kind of seasonal business, all the work that you did in October in our world, what's nice is those checks come in December. Yeah. And so when your business is slowing down and you're sort of like, oh, that day-to-day cash flow,
we're not installing any sprinklers this month. Yeah.
You start getting some checks from work you did in October. You're like, oh, this is great. And then it eventually all catches up. But you have to have that, at least that initial little gold pot of savings to get you through that initial outreach.
So we're talking a little bit about the mistakes that we make. What if I run into a cash flow problem? Let's say that I'm a masonry subcontractor and I run into a bit of a cash, and I'm like, hey, Steve, I can't, I got to pay my guys. How do I get paid here a little bit, knowing that it's coming in 40, maybe 90 days? What does that conversation look like? And I'm happy to hear either answer.
Yeah. So there's a couple things I would say to somebody like that. First thing I would say is, if you don't have a bookkeeper or somebody that holds down the fort while you're out there painting the wall or, applying your trade, you're trying to scale up and grow. You've got to have somebody that's sitting in an office helping you run air traffic control, because those will be the
right. No, that's a great analogy. Air traffic control. Yeah.
That's what'll keep the cash flowing as efficiently as possible. There'll still be a lag. Those lags most people can get through. The lags that kill you are when you were waiting 45 days and then you thought the check was going to be in the mailbox, and you go check the mailbox and it's not there. And then you call and find out, no, your application was rejected. It was all wrong. Oh, well, how do I fix it? Oh, you just have to check that one box. And then you check the box, and then the clock starts over 45 more days. That's the game that the big companies play because they've got hundreds of millions of dollars out there at any given time. So the longer they can drag it out, just adds up in their bank accounts, right?
Yeah, but they
So
also need systems. They also have to have their checks and balances, just like you would,
for
right?
sure.
Like using
Yeah,
your
they're
car
not going to
analogy, I'm
cut a
not going
check
to come
unless
and buy
they
a
know.
car and then say, "Well, we'll give you the tires later." No.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So really having some administrative support of some sort is very important to just keep the cash moving. Now, if you really got into a bind, there are factoring companies out there.
Mm.
It's not my favorite, but if you have no cash, there are companies that I have friends of mine that are, function as subcontractors, with companies like me that will go to a factoring company out there
Yeah.
and basically take their accounts receivable and say, look, I've got $30,000 worth of receivables that these other big companies owe me and they're coming, but I need the cash now.
Yeah.
A factoring company will say, all right, well, you sign over that accounts receivable to me and I'll give you money right now, but I'm taking 10%, or
Yeah, or more.
whatever. And that hurts. But if you need cash, you're dead without cash. So
I'm so glad you brought up factoring because factoring to me, I know that factoring is an option, but I do it with one eye. I'm like factoring, like when you see that I'm factoring, what's your thought as at your level? You're knowing that I'm one of your subs who's using factoring.
doesn't bother me. It really
Oh,
doesn't.
great.
To me, it means you're trying to grow, right? It means you're trying to grow and you're trying to keep cash strong in your business. Now, I might come to you at some point and say, what are you paying for the factoring? Because maybe we should talk about, I'll push money out to you a little bit faster if you're willing to give me the cut.
Mm,
That's one of the other benefits of sitting in the chair that I sit in is that my cash flow is also seasonal. I have stronger parts of the year that I'm cash
right.
rich and weaker parts of the year that I'm not. And we've arranged at times with the right partners to say, hey, this client doesn't pay for 45 days. We'll pay you in 15 if that's an important thing to you, but it's a business. You're going to have to give
I,
me something that makes sense to compel me to put my cash out there for
yeah.
you sooner. And maybe we can align and create a win-win scenario. So those are
Yeah.
the things I think of when I hear someone's factoring.
This is a really nice, sophisticated conversation that's just putting an exclamation mark on the fact that this is about business. We just happen to do contracting.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't
Yes.
matter that I'm a masonry subcontractor or a painter or a cabinet maker or architecture mill worker. None of that matters. No offense to anybody in any trade. This show and this conversation is about the business of the contracting business. And that little
100%.
insight you just gave us there is incredible for people to hear.
It's a fascinating business. In some ways, it's super simple, which is what attracted me to it to begin with. But then there are
I need
lots of
simple.
little nuances as you grow and look to continue to grow. And listen, I don't mind the barriers to entry in our world. Licensing is another one.
Hmm.
We're licensed presently in 47 of 50 states in the US and across all Canadian provinces. Not all places require licensing, to be fair. There's,
Sure.
probably 26 US states off the top of my head, it might be less, that don't require licensing for the work we do at all. And as long as you're a legal business entity that is registered to pay tax in their state,
Yeah.
you can do whatever you want. But then there's a lot of states, especially in the Southeast, California, Arizona, Nevada, there's certain pockets of the country that are very license intensive. They're typically where natural disasters occur because they're trying to weed out
Oh,
thousands of
interesting.
contractors coming in from out of state and running scams on their residents,
Right.
right? And or taking food out of the mouth of a contractor that's been there his whole life and finally he's got an opportunity to do all this work. And here come all these other contractors from all these other places. So, there were some good reasons for wanting to be more organized in their approach for, keeping contractors legal, quote unquote. But the licensing piece is tricky. It's tough. And, those are the kinds of things that, a lot of people, it scares them away from our business. And that's fine with me. Be scared. Don't come in it. Don't come
We don't
here.
need everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll deal with that headache. And yes, it's a giant headache, but Once you put in all the energy and effort and then you have that behind you, okay, well, that was a nice barrier to entry. If one of my competitors wants to come in and compete with me fairly and be truly price competitive with me, then are they truly licensed? Are they really carrying the appropriate insurance? Do they? If you really have all the things that I have, and we're really comparing apples to apples,
Yeah. Yeah.
then good for you. Then come on in and you're a good competitor and let's push each other to be better. But if you're coming in trying to do it, out of the back of your truck, it's not the
No,
business.
out of the back of your truck, you have lots of other options that
Yeah,
aren't the professional options we're talking about here.
right.
So that we could paint a picture for people without using names, but using numbers, if that makes sense. Can you tell me a story about a contractor who started with X number of employees and now understanding how to really serve a client like you, they've grown to this many people, and you can do it by revenue or by employees. But I think it'd be interesting for people to understand the scope of what we're talking about here.
Well, for having been fortunate enough to work in the franchising world where we were offering platforms for people to come in and literally it could be themselves and their spouse or themselves and their son or daughter.
Yeah.
And they're the two starting employees. And then they start with, maybe a handful of tradespeople to work for them. And then they bring in an office assistant. Then they bring in an estimator. Then they bring in a salesperson and also some marketing, right? And you start adding, and I have seen many, many, many businesses go started from scratch with just family members as employees to within 2 years, over $1 million in revenues and six-figure profits to within 5 years, 3 to 5 million. Crazy. With well into six-figure profits to, north of 10 million and an enterprise with dozens of trucks and vans and dozens of employees and huge profile in their local marketplace. And right. I could name countless examples.
All because they're running a good business on solid systems, keeping promises.
Yeah, that's nobody.
At the end of the day, isn't it just that?
Nobody got that big by scamming people. They did. The information's too prevalent. If I want to find out about you, I can so quickly find out everything bad that was ever written about you. And it used to be, when you and I started way back, it was, gosh, College Pro's great because I don't know how to find a painting contractor. I don't know how do I know who the good
He just knocked on my door. Some kid knocked on the door. He seems nice.
Yeah, he's clean cut. He's honest kid trying to go to school.
Yeah.
We learned that the bar was low for what most consumers out there knew about contracting and knew how to select good contractors. And once we started focusing on those things, and
you're making me remember back to my painting days. My two biggest competitor was the fire hall, because the firemen in my neighborhood, in the area that I painted, they were painting as well. And so the woman of the house has to make a decision. Does she want to see firemen clambering all over her house or a bunch of pimple-faced kids? Right. And then another gentleman who has unfortunately passed away, Miroslav, who had a forearm like Popeye because he painted everything by brush. And if Miroslav had his own, I can't remember what you call it. He made the paint colors in the back of his station wagon. Like, this guy was old school painter. But if he was at a house, I wasn't going to win.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't going to win. But again, local impact. What I most appreciated about what I learned in the student painting world, and I've carried forward, is the importance of systems and putting predictability in place. I'm still working at it today. I'm still trying to be better all the time, but I crave systems. When I see no system in the business, I get very itchy. I don't like that.
All right, so I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more that just popped into my head that applies, I think, to any business. And this was taught to me by a mentor that, I don't want to call them out right here, but you're probably well aware of this person, and they're, very big in the world of College Pro, CertaPro, and all that stuff. And so this person, if they're listening, knows I'm talking about them. They preached, sometimes it's better to say no. Sometimes you have to know your own limits and limitations. And as much as that huge project was so tempting and looked so interesting and juicy, your customer will respect you more when you say, that's a little out of my wheelhouse. And I want to do that project for you. I know you need me to do that project, but I feel I would disappoint you in the delivery. I would rather keep doing the things I'm doing for you now and delivering on those, and then maybe jumping to something a little closer to what we're doing now before I leap all the way off that deep end
Wow.
and disappoint you. And now I put at risk all the work that we've done for years and years that I assumed was bread and butter until I disappointed you on this thing that
Yeah.
I thought I was just trying to help. And I'd have been better. I'd been more helpful that if I'd have said, I can't do that project, but I can help you find someone that can.
Yeah.
It's the miracle on 34th Street, right? The Santa that's willing to send you to to Gimbals instead of
Yeah.
Schroeder's or whatever. Sometimes your customer will respect you more when you say,
Can't
I
do it.
can't
I'm
take
not
that
your
one.
guy for this one. Yeah. That's incredible. So the mistakes, if I understand you correctly, and to summarize, the mistakes that a subcontractor can make on this growth path is really just not following basic business principles, having transparency and being honest with you. So far, we haven't talked about swinging hammers, running
No,
saw, like none of it.
that's table stakes. I'm assuming that you can do that.
Right. You mentioned technical proficiency. Like if
Yeah.
you're an HVAC guy, you got to be great at HVAC, or mason, great at masonry, right? But beyond that, we're talking really about having a good business running on, is that right? Running on just
Yeah.
solid fundamentals and then keeping your promises.
If I have two carpenters and they're both the same level of craftsman or craftsperson, the one that's going to do business with me is the one that's got the business elements of, having systems in place that they can invoice properly, they can take their pictures, they can interface with our technology, and they have somebody that when the phone rings, they're answering and saying, what can I do for you?
Right. Love it. Love it. So simple.
I wish it sounds simple coming out of my mouth, but boy, it took a lot of these grays to.
You know what, though? You opened by talking about the Super Bowl. So let's go back to football for a second. We all have the same rule book. Every football team's got the same rule book. They all have the same positions. Yeah, they have different salaries and salary caps. But at some point, there's a leader. There's a leadership team that said, this is the kind of team we're going to build and the kind of culture we're going to put on the field. And at the end of every season, the top two get to battle it out and we get to watch it. But they're all operating on the same rule book with the same football and the same. Oh,
What a great transition you're making.
Okay, look at that. Let's bring on
Let me
that.
put this back on and talk about the best run franchise in all the sports.
But isn't that true?
It 100%. I mean, there's a reason that certain teams, even with the huge payrolls that they have, struggle. And then there's certain teams that just year after year, they're right there in it. And it's because their scouting's better, the way that their training facilities are better, their nutrition plans are better, the things that you don't maybe
The front
see
office
every day.
systems. We don't see the front office systems. We don't see their
Right.
long-term scouting and player development. We don't even see how they treat their physiotherapists, but all those things add up. Like you said before, you got a bookkeeper, you got an estimator, you got a project manager. Those things we don't see. They probably never show up on the job site, but in the background, they're running properly, which is why those contractors keep getting bigger.
Well said.
Well, I'm just here to mirror your greatness. Steve, listen, this has been fantastic. If somebody wants to reach you or find out more about BrandPoint, how the heck do we find you?
Well, thanks for even calling that out. I'm really grateful for this opportunity. You can see my logo up here, BrandPoint. So it's www.brandpointservices.com. And my name is Steve Hearon, Hearon. If you've gone on our website and you've gone and clicked onto the vendor partners, there's a whole part of the website dedicated to becoming a vendor for BrandPoint. If for whatever reason you unsuccessful in that adventure and you feel you need to reach out to me directly, you can email me at shearon@brandpointservices.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And would welcome the opportunity to partner with anybody trying to grow their business out there in the world of contracting.
So incredibly generous of you. That's great. You know what's really neat is I'll bet I would have looked at your LinkedIn profile and thought, unapproachable. It's BrandPoint. How am I ever going to reach that guy? And you came on here and shared everything so openly with us in a really simple way. So nice.
Well, again, it's an honor to be here. I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to talk to you.
All right. Thanks, Steve. Have a great day. We'll have you back again.
All right. Look forward to it.
Okay. Bye-bye.